In this lesson we're going to look at the difference between magnets and magnetic materials. So by magnets we mean permanent magnets, and by magnetic materials we mean materials which are attracted to magnets but which are not necessarily magnets themselves. So for example, here we've got a ferrite magnet, typically painted blue and red for North Pole, blue for South Pole, and for our magnetic material we've just got an iron object, for example. Now, to really help us understand the difference between these two, we've got to use a term called magnetic domains. Both the permanent magnet and the magnetic material contain magnetic domains. Now, the problem is that the term magnetic domain doesn't really enter in the IGCSE or GCSE curriculums in a general rule, but it is really very difficult to explain the difference without using this term. So what exactly is a magnetic domain? Well, we can think of magnetic domains as being like really tiny micromagnets. So this magnetic material is made up of millions and millions of tiny magnetic domains, or little tiny micromagnets, and likewise the permanent magnet. So to understand the difference between the two, we've got to look at how the magnetic domains are different in the permanent magnet to those in the magnetic material. So let's just remove the paint from our permanent magnet. And so for example, this could be a ferrite magnet, and we'll look at what ferrite magnets are made of in a minute. And our magnetic material, well, this could be made from one of three elements in the periodic table which possess a property called ferromagnetism. Now there are, I believe, a couple of others that have recently been discovered, but the really important ones from your point of view are iron, cobalt and nickel. Now, before we go on to discuss the components of a permanent magnet, first of all, let's look at the domains in each. So we'll represent these magnetic domains with little kind of red arrows there, like that, and these indicate the direction of the magnetic field produced by each of these magnetic domains, or micromagnets as I've called them. So in the case of the magnetic material, what do these look like? Well, first of all, they're all jumbled up in all directions, okay, randomly. So we've got different magnitudes and different directions, and the resulting magnetic field produced by all of these randomly orientated domains is that they all cancel out, and so the magnetic material is not magnetized, it has no magnetic field. Whereas in our permanent magnet, the domains are orientated in a particular direction, remembering that this end of the magnet was red and this was blue, so this is the north pole of the magnet and this is the south pole. Our domains will tend to be orientated from south to north. Okay, the arrowhead represents the north of our magnetic domain. Okay, so these in general will be aligned from south to north. They won't be perfectly aligned, but they will generally be aligned in this direction. So one key difference between a magnetic material and a permanent magnet is in a permanent magnet, the domains, these little micromagnets, are all aligned in the same direction, whereas in our ordinary magnetic material, they're randomly organized. Now, another key and very important factor in our permanent magnet, and for this reason it is called a permanent magnet, is that the domain orientations tend to be fixed in this same direction. Whereas in the case of our magnetic material, they are actually free to orientate themselves. So these domains are actually much more free to move and reorientate themselves in the case of our ordinary magnetic materials such as iron, cobalt and nickel, whereas in the case of the permanent magnet they are not free to move. They tend to be fixed in the same orientation. For that reason, its magnetism is permanent. Now we'll summarize these two differences in a minute, so we'll have those written down on the screen. Now before we do that, I'd just like to compare briefly the components of the magnetic material and the permanent magnet. As I just mentioned, the magnetic material tends to be made from either pure iron, cobalt or nickel, whereas our permanent magnets tend to be mixtures of different materials. So for example, ferrite is a mixture of iron oxide and metal carbonates such as strontium carbonate or barium carbonate, typically. Right, so that's your standard classroom ferrite magnet. Right, whereas alnico is an alloy made from aluminium, nickel, iron and copper, predominantly iron, but these other three elements also present in the mixture, and sometimes titanium is used. And modern day neodymium magnets are alloys or mixtures of neodymium, iron and boron. Okay, so notice that the permanent magnets still contain the ferromagnetic material. That's important. Without that, they're not going to become magnets, right? They've got their iron and their nickel there present in the structure, but there are also other components present. Now, the science of making these permanent magnets is quite, high tech, but it is basically the presence of these other components which help to fix these magnetic domains in a permanent position and helps the magnet to retain its magnetism. Okay, so these mixtures are very important when producing a permanent magnet. Okay, let's just summarize that again then. So in the case of a permanent magnet, the magnetic domains present are fixed, they're in a fixed position, whereas in a magnetic material, the magnetic domains are free to change direction. Now, the other important factor in the production of a permanent magnet, if you want to make a permanent magnet, not only have you got to ensure that the magnetic domains remain fixed, so the choice of materials is very important, but also as you're producing that magnet, as these domains are coming together in the formation of the magnet, it is important that the magnet is made in the presence of an external magnetic field. That external magnetic field ensures that the magnetic domains initially align in the direction that you want them to, and then once they've aligned, once the magnet's formed, they remain fixed in that orientation. So for example, a classic example of this is one of the oldest permanent magnets known to mankind, which is a naturally occurring ore which is found in the Earth's crust, and it is magnetized, it is magnetic. And as with the standard ferrite magnets, it's made from iron oxide, Fe3O4, which is a ferromagnetic material, okay, which possesses magnetic domains. And so when this iron 3 oxide was forming, when the rock was forming millions of years ago, as the Earth was cooling, and these iron oxide crystals formed into the magnetite rock, well, they did so in the presence of the Earth's magnetic field. Okay, and as the magnetite formed, then the Earth's magnetic field would have orientated the magnetic domains in that magnetite so that they orientated themselves along the field lines of the Earth's magnetic field. Okay, so these domains then become fixed in orientation and the magnetite is effectively magnetic.